believe so. I'm seeing some yeses. I can hear you. Okay, so good evening, guys. Welcome to our chat tonight. Welcome to the chat. As opposed to my typical live streams or the live streams I've done before, I did a lot of preparation for the previous live streams with presentations and whatnot, but I kind of want to have more of a question and answer, and then I will give you kind of my main insight from all of the experiences I've had, from all of the places I've been, and the perspective I have after living abroad since 2012, 2013, and then also from doing this kind of documentary, you could call it, this kind of research, survey research, you could call it. So let's see here. I don't know why it's not letting me go up, but I'm seeing some comments here. Let's see. 10 by, yes, loud and clear. Juris Doctor, I can't hear you. I can hear you. Your content, bro. Okay, let's go. Yeah, okay, there. Now it's rolling. Okay, very good. So we have a good evening from Lakeland, Florida. Kevin Hawthorne. Hello, Kevin. Welcome to the chat, guys. And today I wanted to talk about the difference between when you are doing research for your relocation. If you're looking into a country and only the country to start off with, I feel like people might be disappointed if they don't look into the city and look at the city first. Because, and now this is not just for, this is not for all countries where this is the best option, because, there's tiny countries around the world. Like there's, nation, city states. Okay. So there's nation, city states like Singapore, Monaco, all these places. When you talk about the country itself, well, you don't really have to worry about getting much variation because it's a city, right? And there's quite a few city nation states. I believe quite a few in Europe, between Spain and France is another one. And so I'm going to talk a bit more about bigger countries, because that's where you see the actual variation. And I think what we'll do today is we'll just use my map and we'll go around on the map. Let me know, guys, if you're hearing me properly, if I'm still quiet. I feel like the volume is good right now. All right, let's get the map up. Let's do a map here on incognito map. There we go. Okay. So if you're joining me tonight, let me know where you're coming from or where you're joining us from. I don't know why I can't see the numbers here. Here we go. Now I can see the numbers. Okay, so I'm changing this to English, and let's take a look at the map here. There we go. Change it to there. Okay, let me throw on a presentation mode. Here we go. Sorry, guys, I'm a little bit behind. I just got back from a very long run. I was running the Malecón, you call it, in a lot of countries, in Mexico, for example. Here, the waterfront area is called La Rambla in Uruguay. So since I live 2 blocks away and I have a really good area to run in, I've been taking advantage of that and did about 9 kilometers or 10 overall. So that was about 6 miles, I'd say, 5 or 6 miles. Just got back from that and I feel pretty good. And I'm going to drink some water and hit some vino with you guys while we talk about relocating and looking at cities as a way to start the research instead of only on countries. All right, so I got some people coming in on the comments. From Billings, Montana. Been living in Houston, Texas, past 5 years. Very nice, very nice. Yeah, the weather must be pretty decent in Texas right now. It must be slowly getting hot. Do you live the summers in Texas, or are you the type of person that has like a summer home where you escape the heat? A lot of people, I think, that live in the South have extra homes. David M., did you play hockey back in Minnesota? I played hockey with my high school friends. You know, the friends that I would meet up with. I had ice skates. You know, I had hockey stick, hockey puck, whatever. But like my school, I went to school in Becker. My school didn't have like a hockey team. I think only like really large schools had them. So you'd had to either that or they're just only for like private outside of school situations. So I played it with my friends. Yeah. I mean, who didn't hit the puck or the hockey ball around, you know, outside in the street? Or, you know, I watched the Flying Ducks when I was young, you know, that took place in Minneapolis, or I think it was supposed to. If it was filmed in Canada, I'm not sure. But yeah, I loved hockey when I was growing up, loved playing it. But I'm not really like a huge fan, nor did I play it like on a team. Okay, so Juris Doctor, do you offer any free trials of a masterclass or anything like that? So at the moment, Juris Doctor, I am split between two things that I'm trying to do. I'm thinking of either developing an app for my audience and for the community that wants to do this type of research into specifically starting at Latin America, because that's my main kind of expertise, you could say. And I don't know if this is going to be the best platform, like building an app from scratch. I have some friends that build apps. I actually worked. I worked on a startup where we built an app. I didn't build it, but I was part of the team that we were going to launch in Peru, in the mining sector. But anyways, the app, I know nowadays is probably a lot easier, but that was 2-3 years ago, and that was a whole different ball game before AI really took over. So apps take a lot of energy, a lot of time, and I need to know first from my community if that's something that people would really want. Like, do you download apps often, and like, do you like using those specific tools to do this type of research? Or do people prefer just like online courses? Like, I think a lot of the people that are in this type of like relocation, help you move abroad type of thing, most of the people, they make an online course, and then they put it on their website. I have a website, but I basically only use it to kind of make contact with people that are interested in contacting me for collaborations or for, random things that involve the channel and the content I make. So my idea is to kind of put everything together that I've been reading from comments for these 2-3 years I've had the channel, that all of the information is scattered. And I'm thinking, okay, well, if I can put it all into one place, maybe it's worth my time and the investment I'd have to put into building it in order to create that for you guys. And yeah, so if you wanted to see that, let me know. I think it would be really useful, but I'm not sure how many people would want to download it or you know, would want to I think the best idea is to have people like kind of pre-order it, have it, have if they're really involved or really interested in this specific type of tool, that would show me that the interest is good enough for me to really go 100% full throttle and build it and put it together with my friends. I have a lot of programmers and friends that are in that build businesses or have businesses with these type of products. So yeah, I don't have a masterclass right now. I don't have an online course, and if that's the best way to like spread my deeper knowledge to you guys and to help you guys in the future, then I probably will end up just doing that. So I haven't really decided specifically on how I'm going to be going about this. I'm just kind of waiting for everyone to show me their interest or lack, therefore the lack of interest. So David says Texas full time. Yeah, okay. So yeah, I've heard Texas can be pretty intense in the summer months. I drove through Texas, I think twice, and each time it was September, and it was very, very hot, especially going down to the south when I drove down to Matamoros and Brownville. That was crazy hot. And it was September, so it wasn't even like, the big middle of the summer months. I played in Montana all growing up too. It was always club, not in schools I think it's in schools, but to be honest, I'm not even sure I know anyone that's played in schools. So maybe I'm just making that up myself, but yeah, being able to find pretty much most sports at our public schools is pretty common. You have the basketball, football, baseball, tennis, wrestling, track. I mean, so many sports are available, swimming. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I think there was a swimming team as well. But anyways, yeah. So I wanted to jump into the map. Let's see here. This is too big. And we can start chatting a bit more about this topic, because I think this topic is interesting. And let's see here what's going on. Okay, just give me a second here. There we go. I think this is better now. There we go. I have to always kind of manipulate the dimensions around. It's like it's all weird. That should be good, I think. We all see basically all of the screen now. Yeah, okay. So I bring this topic up because I saw someone had already mentioned it, and I thought it was a very, very interesting thing to bring up, because it's something that I think you wouldn't think to do when you're first doing your your research. We have some more comments here from Tenbai. Extreme rural jungle Bolivia versus extreme rural Orient. So that's eastern Ecuador. I feel like Bolivia is far less expensive, and whatever I do, it's going to be to essentially disappear and live my life amongst the natives. Wow, that's quite the plan. I've been leaning towards Ecuador. Let's take a look at what he's talking about here. So he's talking about the extreme east, which is right here. I haven't been to any like real jungle areas besides Puyo. So when I was my first trip, actually my very first trip into Ecuador, which I fell in love with Ecuador on my first trip. I went to Baños. Baños is an absolutely gorgeous part of Ecuador. Perfect climate, 1,500 meters in the middle of the Goldilocks zone. And I rented a mountain bike, and I biked down to Puyo. So this entire road goes all the way down to the like basically the foothills of the mountains, beginning of the jungle. And that was great. I went with two Kiwis I met when I was there, and we the three of us went down. I ended up actually falling off my bike and cutting myself pretty bad on my shoulder. Still have a big scar on my shoulder from that trip. But that's pretty much my only like real jungle experience I've had in Ecuador. So I can't really really give you much input on the jungle side of Ecuador, or to be honest, or even Peru, because I haven't been to the Peruvian jungle either. So I guess in Peru, the closest I have been would be, Ollantaytambo, part of the Sacred Valley going towards, like going east or north or east. That's kind of like where it slowly transitions to the jungle. And I never made it there. I was thinking about crossing into Brazil by via Puerto Maldonado, but I decided that it would be way better just to go follow the mountains over through Bolivia. And that's what I did. I crossed over from Cusco. I went from Cusco to La Paz, and then spent like a week there. Went to Cochabamba for 6 weeks, and then, that's how I went into Brazil. Yeah, and so Tenbai is saying, I've been leaning towards Ecuador heavily because of visa processes and moving a shipping container. What are your insights on Bolivia? Because there's not nearly the information on Bolivia available. Okay, so you were bringing up Bolivia and the jungle area. Well, I don't have any experience really in the jungle area, which would be more in this part, like going north of Cochabamba. This part of the country, like these departamentos, are more the jungle spots. I think this is the most famous kind of jungle area. I was told to go here like a million times. Rurrenabaque. I never end up going, but this is basically when I told people I was on my bike, on my motorcycle going through, hey, you have to go to Rurrenabaque. I'm like, what? What? But yeah, I have to tell you, I really don't know how these places are to live. I personally prefer being in larger cities, just because I'm from the countryside. I grew up in the countryside in Minnesota, like next to Becker, and like in a town, not even a town, in the the sticks with no people. So I do like living in the country, and furthermore with the my job working online, I need it. So it's hard for me to give you some really good input on that, because I literally have not been to the jungle in any of those three places. But the people I have interviewed seem to tell me that it's not a super easy place to live in. The people are nice. They say, of course, the locals are nice. And it also depends on if it's a very touristy place. There's touristy places. I believe Iquitos is the main one in Peru. And yeah, so if you go into some of these more touristy places, you probably wouldn't want to live in the city. I don't know if that would be something you would want, constant, sentient, or people that are constantly moving, going through the city as a way, as a means of checking out the other jungle areas. So I'm not sure how that would be, to be honest. It really depends on how much you want to really rough it. Because you're gonna just not have the same services and the same access to healthcare. I think nowadays probably the internet has arrived and is decent at least in Peru. Peru's internet and pretty much most of the country is fantastic, and Ecuador as well. Ecuador had never had issues really with the internet on all of the places I stayed at. I stayed in Quito, Ibarra, Cotacachi, Manta, Guayaquil, over at actually my first place that I went to on the coast was Montañita, and that was a while back, and the internet was decent, and that was back in 2018. I stayed in Riobamba. I don't think I'm about to say Riobamba and Cuenca. So yeah, I don't, it depends on if you really need that or not. The internet's obviously very important for me because I work online. So yeah, hard to say about those things, to be honest. 10 by. So Visa processes and moving a shipping container. My guess is, did you see any of the videos and the input that Mike gave about bringing his container down to Ecuador? That would be something I would look into for if if you haven't already checked out his videos or checked out the links and the suggestions that he gave, the company he used. He moved down from Iowa down to Cuenca, and yeah, he said it was totally worth it. Good price, good company. So, yeah, anyways, let me know if you've checked out his video or not. Okay, 10 by 466, as there is on Ecuador. James Rochas, I already moved to Brazil, but curious to know your hack. James Rochas, what exactly are you asking about my hack? Like my perspective on it, or I'm not really sure what question you're asking. Yeah, 10 by, yeah, easy of Puyo or Zamora. Okay, Puyo. I'm not seeing Zamora here. Zamora. Okay. All right, so you're looking at right next to Loja. Ah, yeah, okay. Yeah, I think I saw that actually when I was looking at the maps. I was planning, my first idea was to exit Ecuador going to Peru through Loja, because I still haven't been there. I've heard really good things about Loja. It's like a small kind of a colonial type of city with, perfect weather, just as is a lot of those mountain towns in the Andes and in Ecuador, and that this one is, yeah, one of the spots as the mountains drift into the jungle. So yeah, no, I haven't been there. I don't really know anything about it, to be honest. So yeah, sorry, I'm not sure how to give you any info about that. I might have met someone that lived there, but yeah, not really sure. 10 by East. Okay, David says my live-in girlfriend is from Lima. Your live-in girlfriend is from Lima. I have yet to visit Peru. David, you should go down to Peru at some point soon. Peru's awesome. Peru is awesome. I know I made some videos that's like, oh, Peru is terrible or whatever. There's just, that's just kind of a way to sell or to promote the fact that Peru isn't perfect. Obviously, nowhere is, but that's just how YouTube works nowadays. You have to kind of be sometimes a bit more. You need to exaggerate sometimes. 10 by Becker, how do you spend a decade in Monomen country? Monomen country. I'm not sure what that is. 10 by. I'm looking to buy several hundred, that's hectares, right, AJ? And starting something fresh, a farm or agricultural something. So interestingly enough, 10 by, I'm actually on Sunday, my plan is to be going to the outskirts. I'm in Uruguay right now, right? In Montevideo. And there's an expat, I believe from California. He said he lives in this area, like north of Montevideo, and he is developing a plot of land that he bought. He bought some land and he's using it for a farm, just like what you're mentioning. So, as for land, I'm not sure Uruguay is going to be the best option because I believe it's probably some of the highest cost. But, that would give you, perhaps his story would be awesome for you to see if he has any good input about developing it. That's kind of what I was planning to do, is just to get his story about how it is doing what he's doing. I think he's younger, so it's not really like a retirement story. For Ecuador, I have seen lots for getting a shipping container, but getting a shipping container to Bolivia seems like it might be more difficult. I wonder if you knew anybody that had done it. Yes, I do. That would be, I'm blanking out on his name right now. Give me a second. Steven. I'm gonna open up another tab here so I can kind of show you guys a bit more of that stuff. Let's see here. My channel. Where is Steven? Here it is. Okay. Let's see here. Here's another one. Yeah, I can use this one. Give me a second here. I'm just going to show you guys one video that actually has exactly what you're talking about, which is he used a container to bring down not only his stuff, but some pianos that he was donating to a church. So, what's going on here? Oh, here. This should be it here. I think, yeah, here it is. Okay, so here's my channel. So it's going to be this story right here. Right here. This is the story where I chat with Steven, who is from Alabama and spent most of his life, I think it was in the colonial Northeast, whatever state, New Hampshire. I don't think it was Connecticut, New Hampshire, around that area. Anyways, he talks about bringing his stuff down to Bolivia, and that was recently too, within the past couple of years. With the new government, with the new president, he's more pro-America. So my guess is that it would not be more complicated than before, probably much less. So I wouldn't take Ecuador off the map. Or sorry, I wouldn't take Bolivia off the list if you're thinking that that's what you want to do, bring down a container. I think of all the countries I've been recently, where I've been doing my interviews recently, I think Colombia. What did I have an interview with a person coming down to Colombia? Well, anyways, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. Yes, I have all of them with stories about their container ship. And also, actually, where I am now, Uruguay. Uruguay, I've done 2 interviews already here with 2 retirees, a couple and a woman and her daughter that came down, and they used container ships as well. So, yeah, you're gonna have a lot of that information to check out later when that comes out in 1 week to 3 months. Okay, so I'm gonna check out some more of these comments here. Your title. What is the wrong way to move abroad? Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, James. I wasn't sure what you were referring to. I already moved to Brazil, but curious to know your hack. Okay, so yeah, you mentioned what is the wrong way to move abroad. Well, clearly, if you already know where you want to go, then that's not exactly what we're talking about here. I'm more referring to people that are doing the research and they're not sure about where they want to go. Like, for example, my uncle Kevin, who's in Washington. I don't know if him or his friend are on this little live stream. They tend to pop on from time to time. His name is Alan. He's in the process of making up his mind. And this is more the topic that I'm bringing up, is that when you're making up your mind, when you're doing the research, and when you're thinking about where you want to go and, where you want to do your trip to, your exploratory trip, doing the proper research is, if you don't have any contacts there, or if you've never been there, if you're, there's obviously a million different scenarios where, yeah, maybe you wouldn't need to do any research if you have a close friend there and they're going to hold your hand and all this stuff. But a lot of times, people don't. A lot of times you've never been to the country. Maybe someone said, hey, go down there. And maybe you go down there and, maybe you spend a ton of money on the flight and you do your exploratory trip and you think, oh, this is, This is okay. I like it. And then you come back and you move down. But then guess what? You come down, and then after the honeymoon phase is off, after you get to the daily grind of what it's like to actually live there, that's more what I'm kind of aiming at, is kind of avoiding doing too little research and doing research properly that will get you good results before you start doing your exploratory trips, right? Because I don't know how often or how much time people are able to take these exploratory trips when they're either close to retiring or when they're trying to make up their mind. I mean, as for me, I'm not obviously based anywhere specifically, but this is more like thinking in a long-term perspective, right? By the way, if anyone's got the drinks out, here's some vino. So salud. I'm going on the Chilean vino here. Maipo. Love the Chilean red wine. Chilean, Argentinian red wine. Phenomenal. The best. This is a red blend. So, yeah, James, that's more where I'm going at, is to try to more give an understanding to people, or to help people to do better research before, some people, they move down sight unseen, which could be a hit or miss. So that's one thing to get to say, okay, be careful with that. But another thing is, when you're doing the research, looking into what I would call regional exploration. That's what you want to do. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about, more or less, as the theme today. But obviously, just ask me any questions you want. I'm here to chat, here to hang with you guys for a bit. Wrong way, thinking of country over. Okay, yeah. So Ed answered more or less the idea that I was trying to express the past 10 minutes. Because so what is let's go back to that topic, because that was my main idea of things to chat about. I think it's a useful thing to talk about, since I don't think it's talked about very much for the research aspect of relocating. So let's go back to this one. Here it is. So yeah, anyways, let's go back to that idea that I was trying to bring up. So when it comes to researching a country, let's the easiest country for me to help you guys understand this idea I have for you is Brazil. Okay, and I don't think that many people are interested in Brazil compared to the Spanish-speaking world, because when I was in southern Brazil, this is southern Brazil right here, these 3 states, and I arrived to Paraná, to Curitiba, and then I spent most of my time in this state here for 2 months. I found almost 0 retirees. I found one in Paraná, and he moved there to Maringá. I met him on the way over to Curitiba from Bolivia. That was, I think, my only retiree that I could find in this entire region, besides one guy that I wasn't able to meet in person, but I'm going to try and do a video call. That's in Rio Grande, Big River. So, yeah, when it comes to Brazil, that's just not a really big retirement area. I think partially because of language, how Portuguese can be a bit more difficult to manage if you're not, already kind of understanding the Latin languages. If you already know maybe French or Italian, then maybe that would be an easier move for you. But I think a lot of my audience, a lot of the people that watch my channel are either, native English speakers, and then maybe they're learning a second language a little bit, or some of my guests that I interview, they speak from decent to good English or great English. I have a couple coming on maybe this weekend, Matt and Kristen, that speak fluent Spanish in Santa Cruz. But yeah, they're over here in Santa Cruz. But yeah, in general, a lot of people don't speak the local language to that fluency point. And I think Brazil might be a spot that people, if you don't already have a girlfriend, a boyfriend, whatever, husband, whatever it is, to connect you to Brazil, I think a lot of people are scared of it, and they're also worried about crime, which I guess that would be a factor. Like if you go to the big cities, Sao Paulo, Rio, Rio de Janeiro, that those two spots are, can be a bit more complicated. But yeah, anyways, when you look at Brazil, Brazil is a good option, a good place to give you an idea of looking at not really country, but regions and cities. So Brazil is massive. Brazil mainland, well, yeah, pretty much all of it's mainland Brazil. There's only couple islands here and there. Brazil is about the same size. I think it's almost or exactly the same size. Not exactly, but very, very close to the mainland U.S. when you exclude, the territories and the Alaska and so the contiguous 48 is the same size as Brazil. So when you talk about the U.S., you wouldn't say, oh, let's move to the U.S. because that's so vague. It's not clear at all. Where? What region? Like, do you like a hot Texas winter or hot, would you like a warm winter in Texas or would you like to freeze your balls off in Minnesota with Eric? It's like there are such huge differences from one area to the other that countries that are large. So I mostly bring into perspective with this idea larger countries. Okay, of course, not all countries. Like even small countries do have some pretty large varieties between the areas, and that could be good for people that want the variety in short distances. But for example, Mexico, right? You're talking a huge area of Mexico is the Central Highlands, right? This is like basically desert, and it's cold in the winter, very cold, and at night at least, and then in the daytime it's really, really nice. But so do you want that, or do you want to be, in the Riviera Maya, right, in the peninsula here? So basically, the idea I had when thinking about this topic was to basically mention, well, when you're looking at different regions that are within a large country, it's basically like looking into many different countries. Sure, the laws are going to be the same. The federal or the national laws, but the state laws are going to change as well, of course. Just like in the States in the U.S., there are differences between one area within the same country and the other. So, for example, I've spent a lot of time in Mexico, so like maybe 2.5 years. So, for example, if you go to certain parts of Mexico, for example, like Monterrey, this is very business area, business city, and it's very hot in the summer. Okay, and they're going to have different perspectives on what you should be doing and how you should be behaving, and it's not really much of a tourist place, maybe a little bit, but it's more business, and also they're going to think of you as you should be a bit more, you should behave yourself, you should be a bit more conscientious, that the people are kind of more serious and more motivated for that type of lifestyle, like the hustle and bustle, go, work hard type of stuff. Whereas if you go to Sinaloa, you go to Mazatlan is basically like you can barely even compare it to Monterrey. I spent maybe 7 months in Monterrey, 8 months, and I spent 2 in Mazatlan, 3. And Mazatlan, it's just a whole different vibe. It's in the same country, and obviously they have the same language but different kind of accents. But this one, like for example, you could basically go on their like little like tourist buses and go drink and go on a party, and you can drink in the streets, and it's totally fine. But if you go to like other cities, like for example Mexico City, they're gonna hit you with a fine or even put you in shackles, put your handcuffs on you. That happened to me in in Playa del Carmen for drinking a beer on the street. So like from one place to another, you can almost not compare them sometimes. So that's kind of the main idea I wanted to bring up, and I'm curious if any of you guys have experienced those type of massive differences from one area and one region or one city within the country to another. I'm going to go back to your comments here. Tenbai. Becker is almost right next to Monoman County. I lived in that area for about oh, is that right, Tenbai? Monoman County. I'm going to look that up because I'm not even sure where that is. Let's see here. Let's see if I can copy paste. Okay, Monoman. Okay, so I'm more or less over here, this part of Minnesota, next to St. Cloud, and you lived up here, which White Earth Reservation. Check that out. I'm not really quite sure if I've ever even been there. Minnesota's a pretty big place, lots of tiny towns spread out, and this is Monoman. I wonder if I have any contacts or family or whatever that lives there. I mean, I used to go every year up to Grand Forks, and we would drive 94 to go up. Oh no, to Fargo. I think we'd drive to Fargo and then go up to visit my grandparents that lived in Grafton back in the day. So that wasn't super far from Grand Forks and Grafton. Actually, probably closer to where my dad grew up, which is Grafton, right? I think it's closer. Okay. Tenbai, taking notes. Thank you. Major gift strategy. My impression of southern Brazil is that it's more expensive and the dating market is difficult for older guys. Okay. So, major gift. How old are you? Where in southern Brazil did you live or did you stay? And more expensive than the rest of Brazil, I think you're probably correct. Comparing it to most of the rest of Brazil, southern Brazil has a bit more of what's called the premium for safety. You could say maybe a safety premium. I'm actually gonna look this up. Regions of Brazil. Okay, so these are the main regions. Let's jump into Brazil so we can. God damn it. Let's look at Brazil as an example. Let's see here. Is this one? Safety check. Safety check. Come on. All right. What's going on here? Can you see it here? Yeah, you can. Okay. So this is a little example of how there's different regions in a massive country like Brazil that basically don't even look like each other. It seems like you're in different countries. So I was in the southern region, which is this yellow area in the south. Three states: Paraná, Santa Catarina, Rio Grande do Sul. They are, in general, I think the more expensive areas to be. But keep in mind, when you're in areas that are kind of far away from the main cities or the main population areas, you're going to actually have to pay more to have stuff sent over to you. Like if you're, for example, if you're in the Amazon and you want something sent up from Sao Paulo, or they want something that's, not from that region, we're going to have to pay the shipping costs to get it there, right? And Brazil's kind of a complicated country to ship things. So I think in general, the closer you are to like Sao Paulo, Rio, Minas Gerais, like this southeast region, which is the orange, that's where the main population of the country lives. And those are the biggest cities. And Yeah, so when you're in that zone, I think things are a bit cheaper just because you are where everything is produced. Or not everything, obviously, but a large chunk of things are produced in these massive cities. And, they have a really good logistics system set up to send things around the country. So, yeah, when it comes to choosing your city and the region, I think that's more important than choosing the country. Now, obviously, this isn't for everyone. If you have a certain visa that you know is going to be impossible in Brazil, and you know that it's going to be super good or super easy or way better in, let's say, Ecuador, then yeah, I mean, then if your specific demands or what you need to have done, the priorities are the visa, which for a lot of people that's where they begin, right? Um, that's that's not a bad way to start, but when you like start with a country just based off the visa, I mean you're kind of missing out on what could be more important, which is how will daily life be for you when you move to this new place, right? Are you going to enjoy, for example, where I am now in Uruguay? Are you going to enjoy? I'm on the coast. Most of the country lives on the coast, and specifically in Montevideo. If you are here, are you going to enjoy the 3 or 4 or 5 months of pretty intense winter here? Like it's not like obviously like Minnesota winter, but it's an area that you wouldn't think, oh yeah, Uruguay must be freezing in the winter, but the people I talk to and the weather averages I see on when I do my research shows that it goes down to near freezing or at freezing. Of course, probably goes below from time to time, and it's very humid. So like when you do your research, it's good to also think about what's going to be happening not only when you visit, because you probably want to plan a visit during the best season or the high season or the best weather of the year, and then plan your trip when it's the opposite, when it's rainy season and dry season. For example, in the tropics, rainy season and dry season. That's going to be in the tropics here, right? Going down to like right here, going down to like Paraguay and Paraná. This is all the tropics, so you're going to be able to choose. Is it do you want to go during the dry and a bit sunnier, or the wet and a bit cloudier and more humid, right? And you want to make sure to do both of those to not have to worry about having that affect you later, that if you didn't think about it, changing so drastically. It changes much more drastically here in Montevideo. Like right now, we're in the transitional months, and we have perfect weather. It's low 60s right now, and at the nighttime, and then mid 70s with pretty low-ish humidity. So yeah, if you come during this time of year and you think, oh, well, is that we're in South America, it must be like that the entire year. Well, that's where you have to be very, very careful. It's because, pretty much very few places have a really continuous type of weather and climate the entire year. Okay, we have another comment here. I'm going to go back. James, dating for me is the big factor. Do you think small Brazilian town is a good option for that? So, James, do you speak Portuguese? 1. 2. Where are you, and is that complicated for you now? Like, are you in a big city like Sao Paulo where it's been difficult to meet up with? I'm assuming you're dating women there, James. I'm not sure who you are or if you know what you're doing there, but yeah, I'm curious to hear. I'll give you guys my own perspective or my own kind of background. So, I did date in Brazil also, and I feel like, yeah, if you are, so this is kind of something I learned over the years, because I spent more than 3 years in Brazil, and At least for the people I've talked to, actually guys that I've talked to. Okay, I have your new message here, James. Just started learning Portuguese. I am visiting Salvador agora, but usually based in the Nordeste. Okay, so you're in. So I actually studied in Salvador da Bahia, where you are now. Let's head over there. Salvador da Bahia. Yeah, I actually studied at the UFBA, the Universidade Federal da Bahia. It was around Brotas, this area. Brotas, and I stayed around this area in Federação. We had some university area in Graça. So yeah, anyways, right here, UFBA. And yeah, when it came to Salvador, yeah, that's it's a very African influenced city, the most African city outside of Africa. So if you're going there and that's kind of your preferences, then that's going to be probably better for you. Of course, there's people of all different looks and backgrounds, but that's going to be the majority. And so when it comes to dating in Brazil in general, something I learned over the years is that, because I speak Portuguese and I love Brazilian culture and the music, the way kind of people are super laid back, and just kind of the whole Brazilian vibe. I was always really into it, and ever since I went when I was a student, when I studied in Salvador. And it turns out that from my own observation and from my observations, the observations from people that I met, it turns out that a lot of times when you do date, you're a single man and you're dating there, they kind of like you for being different. Okay, they like you for your exotic style. If you're trying to be like super Brazilian in Brazil, like you're speaking Portuguese, you like to go to maybe the Roda de Samba, the samba circle where they play the drums, and yeah, if you do like super Brazilian type of things, well, I think a lot of times the Brazilian girls, for example, they look to meet up with foreign men in my case, that are different and that speak. They want to practice their English. They want to, have you talk about where you're from and how life was like there, and perhaps they want you to bring them there to see it. They're curious about where you're from, or just exploring the world. And to be honest, I think a lot of them are just the ones that go after foreigners. They're just not into Brazil, or specifically Brazil in this case. They're not super into their country. They're more like, Brazil's okay, but if I meet someone that's from a cool place, I want to go check it out. So that was kind of one of the ideas I got from when I was single there in the past, and other men that I met that were dating there. So that's just my kind of my little perspective, is that trying to be too local is actually going to be a detriment. That's not going to help you in any way. So that's kind of an interesting aspect of being there. Here we have James again. I also want to study at UFBA, but is that course enough for getting the student visa? I mean, class hours per week. James, I studied there in 2011, I believe. So it was a whole different thing. This was 15 years ago. 15, that's a long time. And what I did was I did a government exchange, or the government grant program from my university in Minnesota. And I studied education down up now, I guess you could say, in UFBA. So I got the student visa through my my home university in Minnesota. How that works today, and if they give, I think there are programs for learning Portuguese. So What visa are you on now? Because that's more like what I would start out with. Obviously, if you're on the 90-day visa, the tourist stamp, tourist permit, you can extend that another 90 days. And I'm not sure how easy it is to transition into a student visa after that. That time expires after you pass that. I think the 183 maximum per year. So yeah, when it comes to getting the student visa, I would definitely look around, go to the Facebook groups, expats in Brazil, expats in Bahia or Salvador. I'm sure there's a group. And yeah, maybe just check into, go into AI and check to see if there's any stories about people that got the student visa learning Portuguese. That's what I would do. 10 by. Yeah, that was the same experience I had everywhere I was in Asia, Eric. Stand out like a sore thumb, and they want to put a Band-Aid on that sore thumb. So why do you mention about that in Asia? Where did you go in Asia, 10 by, and like what was your what was this experience you're talking about? The Band-Aid on the sore thumb. James says, what's going on here? What's going on? Stop. There we go. James says, with a digital nomad visa now. Okay, so you want to go into a student visa now. Is that what you're saying, James? About my dating experience, sex was good at the start, but then it became too much flakiness when trying to meet new people. Bit tiring, to be honest. Okay. Too much flakiness. So that's after you've been dating for a while, or do you mean like on your first date? I think that's pretty much overall in Latin America super common. So not trying to avoid the flakiness is just not going to happen really. I think it's pretty much all of Latin America. David M. Does your group show or explain ways to earn online? How have you been able to make money online all these years primarily, David? David asks. So I have interviewed many people that do many different things. Okay. What's that? Sorry about that. So, if you go through the expat interviews, you'll see that there's just a huge variety of ways where people make money, either directly in person in the places they're going to, or doing it like me. I'm a digital nomad. I've been doing online work, you could say full time since 2018. So I was doing it two and a half years before the COVID situation made it much more common for everyone. And so with that being said, I kind of had already an upper hand. I make pretty much all of my income teaching. So I teach English to mostly non-native speakers, so ESL, to Chinese. I've taught many different areas of Asia, but most of it's Chinese. Sometimes it's Koreans. I've taught Vietnamese. I lived in Vietnam for 5 years, so I still have contacts there, but I don't have too many job opportunities. I don't know, I have something going on here. Too many job opportunities for Vietnam. But yeah, anyways, that was my own personal story. And, besides trying to get this project rolling, that's what I spend most of my time, and my income comes mostly from that. Some of the other people on the channel that I have interviewed, for example, in Ecuador. Let's go back to my channel page and I can show you a couple of them. So, yeah, if you go to my playlist, guys, if you don't know, I put together a playlist for you guys. I'm sure you've seen that in many of my earlier videos. I put that as like the middle plug, or the little unrelated info in the middle that I have the expat. Where is that? Families abroad. Tips and tricks. Where did that one go? Here it is. Expat interviews is a playlist I have for you guys, and this has all the different stories of every person that I've put on my channel. 97 videos. Look at that. So I have many stories. I mean, there's people that repeat. In the past, I was doing like one story per video, basically, in the beginning, instead of doing like a long video. Like, for example, like my first big chat was with Jenny, and that was like 40 minutes long, and I felt like a lot of people wouldn't watch the entire video, so I thought it was better to kind of condense it. So anyways, she's not retired yet, and I believe she kind of does relocation services. So that's kind of, if you go to a specific country, you want to help people move there, a lot of people kind of get into that type of industry, that type of job. Yeah, I'm sure they have their own value, and the services they give, I'm sure they help you, but I wouldn't say that's the best ideal situation. Obviously, it takes a while to get your contacts and to know the place and to provide a legitimate service to people. I think that shouldn't be your first thing you want to do. So retirees, retired. These guys were doing an exploratory trip, so not retired. Jay, okay, so Jay is just like me. Jay, he is Canadian, and he was, when I met him, I think he still is doing full-time teaching, just like me, online. I think he teaches adults, ESL igual. ESL, just like me, it's the teaching English to non-native speakers, but I think he mostly focuses on Japanese. I'm not sure. Let's see, I think he's pretty close to retired. Scott from, not Scott, for the Scottish friend here. He works doing, I think he started doing web development and then moved into, he still does web development related jobs. So, but now he's kind of developing his own tourism type of thing that he wants to more pivot, or he wants to spend most of his time in that. Scott, he was a TV colorist, and what is he doing now? I think he works still in maybe marketing. So, there's a lot of, online related jobs that people take, and they do. She works teaching both online and in the schools. Derek actually moved down with his parents, and he was actually working in a restaurant when I met him. He's a retired vet. I think she was working online as well when I met her in Guatemala. Let's see. He also works online for most of his, Kevin, in Peru. Michelle, she was working in schools as a teacher as well. So a lot of people do teaching, surprisingly. Let's go back to the comments here. 10 by dating Korea, Taiwan, China, Japan, Philippines for a decade. Oh, wow. A full decade in Asia. I was 5 years in Vietnam, and that was a fantastic experience, but I definitely missed being able to communicate. I don't speak Spanish like perfect, nor Portuguese, but it's more than enough to be able to meet anyone randomly on the street and have a decent conversation, even if they don't understand my accent very well. So yeah, that's. Well, I mean, the Philippines is probably going to be the best area if you're worried about the language part being an issue. James says, like trying to meet new people from the dating apps. They agree and don't. Yeah, okay. So, James, that is 100% going to happen in all of Latin America. So, I don't think it's, maybe it's more of a new phenomena and maybe it's becoming more common because of social media and because how connected people are online nowadays than more than before. Like when I was dating, years back, I have a girlfriend now, but when I was dating and I used those apps and whatnot, it seemed like, as the years progressed, that when you chat with the women on those apps, they are flooded with so many invitations, not only on the apps like the dating apps, but also like just on regular social media. Like in Latin America, a very common thing to do when you meet someone is just to get or give them your Instagram. And I think that possibly plays another part into, specifically in Latin America, that it's just a super common thing to get someone Instagram, right? And I think that like when it comes to the better looking women, they have their Instagram. People just randomly add them, they start messaging them, and then not only are they contacted and says someone might say, hey, let's go meet up and let's go out for drinks or blah blah blah, like just through DMs, just through the messages on social media like Instagram, that you're basically competing with them when it comes to you on the app. Because furthermore, when you're on the dating app, like they're not going to see maybe as much information about you, maybe as many pictures, and maybe on social media on Instagram, they're going to see perhaps if the person puts a lot of stuff on there, they're going to see and maybe trust them more. So I think that's kind of what's been happening, and what probably is going to continue happening is that. I have my buddy who is some friends that are in Mexico. They've been talking about how that's been getting worse throughout the years. They're both single, and they see that happening. Okay, 10 by James, go to local open air markets gold. Do you have any suggestions like of a spot where James can go? I'm not sure where if James said where he is now, but yeah, where do you typically go, 10 by? Do you go to the local market in Salvador de Bahia, the open air market? David says, okay, cool. Yeah, I'm leaning towards online tech sales, contract work, or learning ads, media buyer, full stack. Okay. I was a rock star in Indonesia the 2 times I spent a month there. You can only stay for 30 or 60 days with that visa. Yeah. So I think that's pretty restrictive in lots of Asia. Is the visas are pretty short. Vietnam, I think you only get, for the tourist visa, you only get so many months. I think Thailand, they restrict you to 60 days. I've never really stayed very long in any of the other countries. I went to the Philippines. I went to Cambodia many times, and Laos, and South Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, Sri Lanka. But I always stayed for shorter periods. Never really affected me. But yeah, I guess that's kind of a thing, that the visa situation in Asia, that kind of is, that's what kind of makes Latin America actually a lot more of a good region of the world. I think a lot of people choose Latin America because of many factors. So we have a region that speaks mostly the same language, right? Spanish for most of Latin America. And if you learn the basics, you can kind of get around in pretty much all of the region. That's one thing. And another thing is the visas in general are pretty decent. Like you can stay up to 6 months in really small countries, Panama, Costa Rica, As of right now, the only country I can think of that doesn't let you stay the full 6 months, like continuously by extending the 90 days, or they don't give you, like some just give you like 180 days right away, like El Salvador. That would be Peru. Peru gives you only 90, and they say, okay, if you're a tourist, You come in for the 90 and get out of here. You can't extend, which is kind of crazy. Yeah, so I get the whole visa situation being kind of complicated, but yeah, you were a rock star in Indonesia. That's pretty cool. So yeah, David, I'd say, yeah, if you already have experience in what you're doing, if you don't have a job right now, if you're in the States, you don't have a job right now, and you want to move abroad and want to have work while you're abroad, make sure to have that before you leave. Getting work after you leave, it becomes more difficult, and you want to make sure to have a company already paying you, or be already in that stable situation instead of looking frantically when, the money dries up. James says, which markets? 10 by. Any country, if they have open air markets, the women are not expecting a guy to actually come up and start talking to them or showing interest. They're catching them not all dressed up and not buried in makeup. You'll get an authentic meeting with people closer to earth. Worked every place I've gone. Oh, there you go, 10 by. There you go. I'm going to get a piece of this tarta that I bought. All right. So we have another message from Major Gift Strategy. Do you personally prefer Latin America over Asia? I have a friend who stays 6 months in Colombia, 4 months in Brazil, and then 2 months wherever else he wants, so he doesn't have to fool with permanent visas. So yeah, I still don't have a visa for any country in Latin America, permanent visa or temporary, none of that. In Asia, it seems like Asia is a bit more strict with the visas. And if you absolutely need a visa, that's probably why people tend to maybe not stick around some of those countries, because they can be a bit more complicated. Southeast Asia is fantastic specifically for food. Food there is phenomenal. Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, where I lived, fantastic food, and super safe, like crazy safe for foreigners. I mean, I was there 5 years with 0 issues, just loving life, going around, exploring, working in Vietnam. Just loved it there. So I was also I was a lot younger. When I moved to Vietnam, I was 24, 25, I think. So, or maybe younger, 23. It was 2012, 13, around that area. And so that being said, I was in a younger period of my life. I'm 37 now, right? So being there, being in a place that's so chaotic in such massive cities, like kind of just Asia in general, just has really, really high population density. On top of that, we're talking very, very limited English in some parts. Thailand is okay. Vietnam's not great. Cambodia is pretty good for English. Malaysia is really good for English. It really changes from place to place. Singapore is good for their English abilities. Philippines, really good for English. So you have options, right? But one of the issues I had was that I didn't really enjoy not being able to communicate. So I guess if that was my big issue, I could have moved to Malaysia or the Philippines or Singapore, I guess. But I wasn't really big on like the long-term idea of Malaysia, just because I'm not Muslim. and it's basically quite a Muslim-style country, and not all of it. Obviously they kind of have like the trifecta type of culture. They have Chinese, the Malay, Muslim, and then the Indian, the Hindu or Hindi, I think it is. So yeah, I mean, I just didn't see myself like really being able to either one fit in or two find. I was single for pretty much all my time in Asia because I just never found a person I really connected with. So I guess long story short, when it comes to my idea of staying in Asia and going back there as a tourist and spending part of my time there, absolutely. I absolutely would love to be able to do that at some point in the future after kind of I finish all of this work that I'm doing in Latin America and take a kind of a break, take a break from Latin America, because I've been continuously in Latin America since I started this in 2022, continuously for 3.5 years. So, when it comes to culture that, you can speak the language, but it's not your first culture, it's good to kind of get a refresher. It's good to freshen up, kind of have a different area with different lifestyles, different languages, different food, just kind of like change things up. And when you mention your friend who stays 6 months in Colombia, my girlfriend is from Pereira, right? So I'll be going there again soon, sometime, to see her and her family and whatnot. And I absolutely love Colombia. It's probably my number one Latin American country, like favorite overall, even despite some of the difficulties I've had with my motorcycle situation there. And the idea of going from, for example, Colombia over to either Brazil, which is, they don't even speak Spanish, but they kind of have a similar way of behaving, right? And so I call the Brazilians basically the Portuguese-speaking Colombians, and then I call the Colombians like the Spanish-speaking Brazilians. They kind of have something, some regions of Brazil, you could say. Maybe Rio de Janeiro, Rio, and Medellin or something. They kind of have a similar, I guess, attitude or similar vibes, similar. Super extroverted, super outgoing type of personality. So anyways, those two are great, but I don't think that would be like for me like that much of a change, but it's nice to go from one place to another and then go to Asia. From there, awesome. Yeah, because you're really changing things up when you go to like the opposite side of the world, really, when you're doing that. So yeah, that would be. It makes sense to me. It makes sense to me to be able to have your time spread out between many different countries, because you don't have to worry about the visa part, and a lot of countries are so they're so open to giving so much time for tourists that, like, there's a guy that has a channel that talks about more like escaping the U.S. or whatever, like and like tax related benefits for leaving. But the nomad capitalist, he talks about what he calls the trifecta, technique or whatever he calls it. Trifecta meaning three different countries within each year. If you spread out your time between 3 different countries for 4 months each time. Let's say 4 months in Colombia and then 4 months in whatever, Mexico or Spain or wherever you want to go. I guess maybe Spain you can't. If you're American, you can only get 90 days, I think. But yeah, 4 months, let's say, Peru, Colombia, and then let's say 4 months somewhere in Asia if they give you up to 6 months. And then you kind of just go between those 3. Then that helps you to I kind of really enjoy being on the move at least a little bit throughout the year. I mean, having 2 places for 6 months per year for me is almost perfect, because I really like having that 6 months and then saying, okay, now it's time for me to head to this new area and be able to kind of enjoy this new culture, new food, and can head back to that place in another, whatever, 6 months, 7 months, or whatever it is. So I think that's a pretty good way of managing things. Well, just say if you're looking for something real and long lasting, I wouldn't recommend Asia. Okay. Yeah, Tenbai, you said you were 10 years in Asia, I think. So yeah. Oh, there is Gachina. She arrived. Gachina's here. Hello, my Natika. Natika. She is in Shanghai, China. And I wasn't sure she would even be able to come on here, my cheerleader, because she is in a place where she needs, what's that called again? The VPN. And she doesn't have a VPN as far as I know, so it's nice to see her. Nice to see her. Thanks for coming on, Gachina. I'm sorry I haven't been able to talk to you when you wake up over in Shanghai. David, can I ask even if $1,000 a month is enough to live in cheaper parts of South America like Colombia, Bolivia, etc.? Okay. Well, David, let's go back to the map here. David, it really depends on how your lifestyle is. I mean, that's, should be a no-brainer, right? Because, that's the same thing anywhere in the world. If you want to live like a local does, in some parts of the world, living like a local can be really, really, really low cost. In some parts, like in Monaco or whatever, these super, super high cost, you could say playground for the rich, obviously the local lifestyle is still going to be more than what a lot of people have to spend. So let's get to this map here, and I'm going to show you where I think $1,000 a month is okay. I mean, in general, I think the only countries where I spent more than $1,000 a month, and where it's typically easier to spend more than $1,000 a month is probably Costa Rica, Panama, and definitely where I am now, Uruguay. Uruguay is the most expensive country in Latin America I've been to, probably double the price of Costa Rica in general. So it really depends on your lifestyle. David, are you going to stay in some, are you okay with not staying in the penthouse, right? Because, if you want $1,000 a month, very rarely is that going to be possible in most of these countries. Because you're going to have to spend, what would it be, like half of that, maybe 500 on your rental, on where you're staying, on your apartment or whatever you're staying at. So yeah, if you live like a local, you find an apartment. Like I usually stay in Airbnb, and I can almost always keep my expenses down pretty reasonably to between $300 and $600 per month, depending on the country, right? And depending on the city. And that's another reason why I brought up this idea of how to do your research, is because when you go to start researching, let's say you look at Mexico. You say, oh yeah, Mexico. Yeah, I've heard it's pretty cheap or whatever. And then you go to Mexico City. Well, Mexico City is really way more expensive than it was in the past. One of the most sought out places for Americans. I believe Mexico City has the highest populations of America outside of America, as in the city with the most Americans outside of the U.S., right? So that's going to be a reason that you're going to be competing with all these other people. A lot of them are maybe the remote workers that, oh, well, if I'm whatever, like in Texas, or if I'm Colorado or California, whatever, they have their direct flights back to LAX if they need to go back and work or whatever. So yeah, you're competing with people that have a pretty high salary. So you want to look into the city, really, instead of focusing on the country first, because if you want you want to look into those main specific ideas. Right? Do you want weather in the mountains, or you want weather on the coast, right? Do you want to be in a big city, or do you want like the small countryside type of feel, right? Do you want an area that's very indigenous? For example, the area Chiapas going into Guatemala. Like there's a lot more of that indigenous style culture. Do you want that? Right? Because you can find that in both Mexico and Guatemala. So depending on like what part of the country you're looking into, like you can find a bit more of an indigenous style culture in Mexico. Here, I stayed in San Cristobal de las Casas, and you'll find that there as well. So, yeah, when you focus on a country overall, that's a good start if like your visa is your biggest priority. But it's not, I think, always a great point to start at when, especially when you're doing your research about where you want to do your exploratory trips, right? You know, getting like the idea of, okay, well, how much do I need if you want the, if you're a retiree or plan to retire there, and you have the income, the fixed income from your Social Security, and that's obviously going to be a really important starting point if you're planning to live somewhere full time. So yeah, you look at that first, and then you should be looking at, okay, well, what region of the country most interests me, right? In smaller countries, maybe for example in Costa Rica, you can go from one part of the country to the other. So when it comes to these smaller countries, that's not specifically going to be as bad. Even though in Costa Rica it takes forever to drive like one area to the other. I stayed 6 weeks in San Jose, and just driving San Jose, to Tamarindo, that's like 7 hours. It's like forever. It's just such a small area. It's just the roads are so bad, and there's a lot of mountains going up and down, and yeah, the infrastructure is actually surprisingly not as good as I was expecting in Costa Rica. So yeah, when it comes to bigger countries, you want to look at the bigger picture of specifically the region, right? Okay, and one of the bigger, actually, now that Gachinia's here, we have some more people here. Let's go back to this here. I'm happy with a plastic chair and a 6-pack in the barrio. Okay. Now I know what you're talking about. Chilling with the cuties. So David, yeah, a plastic chair, 6-pack in the barrio, in the outskirts, or the less, you could say, less desirable cities. Yeah, David, if you're asking about $1,000 a month with that, practically most of Latin America besides Uruguay, I think, is going to be a very, very doable situation for you. Specifically in Colombia, where the beer is like insanely cheap there. I think probably the cheapest in Latin America that I've seen. There in Mexico. Gachina says, happy to hear my baby. Gracias, Gachina. Thank you for coming to say hi before your shift in Shanghai. Tenbai, Eric, wouldn't you say if you've got $1,000 a month that you need to be concerned about what type of visa you're looking for as well? Most of the countries, rentista requires quite a bit more income. So, Tenbai, do you have $1,000 retirement income like Social Security? Because, yeah, as of right now, that $1,000 per month is going to be not enough for a lot of countries. There are different visas. Like if you check out my video about with, where are they? Let's see here. There it is. If you see if you watch the full video, I think I still have it available on for public. Yeah, the public video of Ruth and Dan. They have not the retirement, like typically I think it's called the Pensionado visa in Ecuador. You should watch their full video, the full chat, which I'm trying to find here. Where is it? Because that was my first video where I posted the short form and the long. This is the long one right here. So this is the video you guys should be watching if you think you want to go to Latin America, but you don't have a high enough Social Security or fixed income for your retirement. They retired early. They went over to Ecuador, and I met them in Cuenca. They live in Cuenca. And they got a visa called the professional visa. And it's gone up. It goes up every year. All visas they go up every year based on the minimum wage in general. I think pretty much all visas are based on that in most of Latin America that I've seen. But this visa was the lowest requirements that I've seen so far, and not particularly difficult. So yeah, if you have a lower fixed income and you're looking at going to a place with low cost of living, Ecuador is an awesome spot for that, and there's going to be really, really good options of finding good accommodation. Like, for example, when I was in Cuenca, I found this really nice apartment. I mean, not in a great location. It was, the location, the neighborhood was fine, but it wasn't very close to the downtown. So if you want the downtown area, you're going to spend a bit more. But I found this really nice apartment on Airbnb. Even with the Airbnb fees, I paid like $400, $420 or something. This really nice 1-bedroom apartment, kind of really modern, nice, has a view of the city on like the 5th floor. Like, yeah, and we're talking on Airbnb, right? So if you're like going there to live long term, you're getting the 6-month contracts, you're getting the year contract, you're going to find even much cheaper, $300, $400. And that with that visa, if that's something you really want to do, is lock in a visa that has low income requirements, then that's going to be probably your best bet that I know of right now. Uruguay also, I mean, I wouldn't say Uruguay is the best place if you have a low income, because it's so insanely expensive here. But their visas to retire here, I don't think have minimum monthly like requirements compared to, like, for example, in Mexico right now, the minimum requirement has gone up substantially since I started making videos about Mexico. So that's at like above 2,000, I think 2,400 or something. So yeah, yeah, in your situation, Tenbai, there's different visas that you can get. It's not just the rentista. Like if you watch the Scott Allen Miller, he's probably doing a live stream right now. Scott Allen Miller, he talks about how the rentista visa is different from other visas you can get, like the pensionado, which is typically I think that one's $1,000 requirement. I think it's 1,000 or a little bit more now. But yeah, those typically go up with the minimum wage increases. They usually do like 3 or 4 times the minimum wage that you need to have that much income to get those visas in general. But yeah, if I were to say visas you could look at right now that don't require much more than 1,000, that would be probably at maybe Panama might be still at those levels. I think maybe I haven't checked recently. Panama, Nicaragua, and Ecuador. James, my amigos from the north. Here, hold on a second. I'm reading a comment here. My amigos from the north of Brazil always badmouth the southern folks. Not sure if I want to go there for dating and living. So your amigos from the north, are you talking about like the northeast where you are, James? Are you in the northeast? I don't think you mentioned where you are specifically. Or did you say that you're in Salvador de Bahia? I kind of got that confused. So just to put forward what I know about the area is that the southern region of Brazil is the safest part. Okay, and that's especially Santa Catarina. I think probably this is maybe the state where there's a lot of productive things going on there, as in lots of business, lots of jobs that pay decent, and incredibly safe. So with that, maybe people with more money go into those areas because they're worried about the crime in the rest of the country. So they go to places like this, Rio Grande do Sul, Paraná. And yeah, so this region in general is very European. It's super European, like to the point where like when I walk through the streets, they look at me and they're like, "Ah, okay, this Brazilian guy, whatever." And then I start speaking to them in Portuguese, like, bom dia, tudo bem. And then they're like, "Oh shit, your accent is in Brazilian." So, and they always think I'm Argentinian or Uruguayan because, again, two countries that have quite a bit of European influence. So, if you speak Portuguese badly, you're probably just from those other countries nearby. So anyways, those areas have a lot of European influence and, European immigrants from the past 100 years or so. And, that makes them a lot colder, just culturally, and the way that they behave. And actually, to be honest, when I was there this past 3 months, I was surprised when I got down here to Uruguay, because the people in Uruguay are far friendlier, are far more outgoing, far happier to talk to you and I guess like kind of chat with you more often than even southern Brazil. Like, Brazil is I would consider it one of the friendliest or most extroverted countries I've ever been to. Colombia and Brazil probably be the two. And of course, some regions are a bit more than others, but in general, the country's like that. And that's why this goes back to the original topic that I wanted to bring up, which is, well, you want to look at a region in a city, because if you're talking about southern Brazil, they're going to be really kind of distant, colder, not as friendly as if you go to the southeast, which is, I think, a great area to start from. If you've never been to Brazil, let's go to São Paulo, go to the capital city, go to like the interior, go to the smaller cities in the area. I haven't been to a lot of them, but I think the people from São Paulo in general are very friendly. And Rio, just be careful in the capital city, which can be very dangerous. And there's tons of cities outside of it, right? So Petrópolis and all these places. So yeah, it's hard to even compare sometimes the southeast to the south, because the southeast are super, super extroverted compared to the south. I would say more warm and friendly and outgoing and more interested in meeting you, where in the south it's more kind of like that cold German style. I'm kind of thinking about myself, and it takes some time of you chatting with them for them to even like kind of trust you or like want to hang out with you or have anything more than just a chat, any kind of relationship, I guess. So yeah, I would say probably that's a big difficulty, James, if you're there, that southern Brazil, they have kind of that almost like that distance that you would find. You see that even in Minnesota. You have like the Minnesota like personal bubble. The personal bubble, like, don't get too close to me. And sometimes it takes a bit of time to warm someone up to like be able to get a closer relationship, a friendship, or whatever, to be able to hang out more regularly and whatnot. So yeah, that's kind of how southern Brazil has been for me. James, but I find Latam much better than Asia. Yeah, right. So that's kind of, I like Latin America in a big part that it's due to having that easier communication and visas, and there's a lot of different benefits, right? And in some ways, it is almost as affordable as like Thailand and Vietnam. Not as much, but pretty close in certain countries. 10 by. Was responding to David about 1,000. Personally, I got bucket loads. You were responding to David. Oh, because that was David saying that. Yeah, sorry. Great stream. Thanks, y'all. Are you taking off, dude? Well, thanks for joining. Thanks for saying hi today, bud. Very nice. What do we got here? So let's go back to a bit more chat about the regions. Let's talk a bit more this time about Colombia. So Colombia is a really good example of a place that has pretty drastic differences from... Okay, we're not seeing the map here, are we? What's going on? Okay, yeah, I can see the map now. So let me know if you guys have spent a lot of time in Colombia or if you've never been there. I have a ton of videos that I made when I was there. I spent a year of this entire trip in Colombia. And Colombia is a great example of a regional area that basically is so completely different from one area to another. Let's see if I can open one of these up without any problems. Okay, so we have... Let's see if I can fit this on the screen here. Yeah, that'll work. So we have the regions of Colombia here. Not a great map, but it gives you an idea. It looks like it just chose like random blues and greens. So in the middle here, we have the Andean region. The Andean region is my favorite. And I think that's where most people go in general, because that's where the biggest cities are, right? Bogota, Medellin, or Natalie's from, Natika's from Pereira, right? The coffee axis. And that's going to be that region by itself. Just if you look at the accents change from one city to the other. You go to Medellin, you have this strong Paisa accent. You go to... Let's go back to the map. So you go to Medellin up here. And this is Paisa, strong Paisa accent. Then you have kind of a softer version of that in some of the coffee region over here, Manizales, Pereira, and Armenia and whatnot. So it almost, Medellin and Bogota, they are quite similar, but then when it comes to the way that people behave, the people are a bit less interactive in Bogota. Bogota is a city with a massive population and colder climate, and probably, I'm not sure if they have a bit worse crime than Medellin, but yeah, just being a city that's probably double the size in population, it's always, gonna have a bit more issues. So, yeah, you're gonna see a different accent, and this region, they are kind of, they share basically the similarities, at least with the climate, more or less, being more temperate. But when you go and they're going to be actually a lot more of the, it's going to have the type of influence in terms of like the racial makeup is going to be more like European. It's going to be quite a bit more European, from Medellin down to Manizales, Pereira, Bogota. And then as you go up to the Caribbean up here, specifically Cartagena. I went up to Cartagena with Natalie, with Natika, when I was making videos up there. And that area pretty much feels like a completely different country. The weather's completely different. It's super, super hot. Pretty much the hottest city I've ever been to. Look, right now, in Colombia right now, it's 2 hours earlier, right? So it's 7:24. 7:24. It says that 27 degrees still. It's just blazing hot, and it's gonna be more like the have the African influence there, and more colonial. The accent's completely different, and so yeah, if you're gonna choose that city over, over what you would have in the coffee region, I mean, you're talking basically night and day. Those are basically two different countries. And, we're talking more about the cultural side, of course, because, it's going to have the same policies, national policies when it comes to the visas, when it comes to doing the bureaucratic side of things and staying there and getting everything done. But, and if you're looking at it culturally, you have to think about, okay, well, how is my life going to be like? When I was in Cartagena and I interviewed, I think her name was Christy, the Australian that was working in tourism, doing tours there. She, she's constantly surrounded by these transient people just going all around the country and starting there or coming in a cruise ship, or, it's a very big party atmosphere, but on the coast, right? So with the beaches everywhere, and yeah, just like, are you going to be able to handle that type of lifestyle, right? So, of course, not all of the entire city will have it. You could probably find something on the far outskirts or certain zones that maybe are far enough away and they're more authentic, but, that's just something to really keep in mind, Sally G. Hello, Sally. How's it going? Fui a Riohacha en 1984. Oh, wow. Look at that. That was 4 years before I was born. Riohacha in Colombia, you're talking about, right? Over here. Riohacha. I have not been to Riohacha. I think, I think it was Rob, my bud Rob, who's on the channel. He's been on the channel many times. He ended up going there, and he found it to be kind of crazy the last time he was there. He said it seemed like kind of an area that wasn't really completely controlled by the police, you could say, and by the laws that are perhaps a little bit flexible in most of Colombia, where he said that, yeah, it's like, it seemed like there was like no laws at all, every man for himself type of, like, he said it was more like the Wild West there. So that's interesting that you went there. That was a while back, longer than I was alive ago. 10 cents back here asking, how did you feel the locals accepted you in Bolivia in comparison to Ecuador? Okay, so interesting question. Let's get this off here. Okay, so let's go to the similarities of the two cultures so that you can kind of get a lens or a perspective of what they're looking at you from. And Ecuador, it depends on where you're talking about, Tenbai, because the part of Ecuador that's the mountains is like the most indigenous part of the country, right? So you're going to have the more, the indigenous mountain, like traditional people. And then when you go to the coast, then the people are a bit more mixed and much less indigenous compared to the mountains. Okay, so it really depends on what you're talking about. And of course, when you go out to the jungle, you're going to have a different style of, like, I guess more like the Amazon style, like jungle. I'm not sure what type of culture is out there, comparing it to the traditional mountain indigenous people. But yeah, it really depends on what you're comparing that to. So that would be my first question to you, is like, what part of Ecuador are you referring to? Are you talking about the mountain indigenous area, or more like the more mainstream Ecuadorian coastal type of like culture there? And so yeah, that would be another thing that you need to know about Bolivia as well, is what specific part are you talking about in Bolivia? Bolivia has, just like in Ecuador, it has its main indigenous, authentic, traditional culture in the mountains. Okay, so when you make it down to Santa Cruz, well, that's going to be a whole like different type of culture and people from Bolivia. So I would say, to be honest, I would say the Santa Cruz de la Sierra, and then the grasslands over on this side, they kind of have like this is kind of like almost like Brazilian style Bolivia, because they start becoming more like let's have our grilled meat and do our farming, and anyways, and there's a lot of Brazilian influence there. And so they have a kind of a different culture compared to the culture that is in the mountains, and that's the same thing with the coastal part of Ecuador, and that would contrast with the traditional indigenous style culture in the mountains. So I would say, I mean, the indigenous people, that I always was really happy to bump into them, have chats with them. And, I'd always go to their shops to pick up fruit, or go to their restaurants, or whatever it is. And they're always super friendly. And perhaps it's kind of the way that you behave and the way that you reach out to them. Amor, te amo mucho, ya tengo que irme. Okay, gachiña, te amo mucho. Okay, have a good day. In Shanghai, everyone say hello to Natika. She's joining us from Shanghai, China. Reportera gachiña. Coming to us from China. Thanks for getting the VPN and saying hi. So yeah, going back to the way that people accepted me. Well, I spent time in the mountains. I spent time on the coast, and they were friendly in both places. Perhaps I think the main thing that I see in the traditional culture is that they're very shy. They're not super outgoing. They're not super into like trying to sell you things. Like being a street vendor or whatever, like trying to push things on you. Like that's kind of a huge type of Colombian cultural thing you'll see, is that the people are like trying to, like, they walk up to you and like, hey, buy this or buy that, or they're very in your face about doing business, whatever type of small product they're trying to sell. They'll walk through the streets with their hands full of something and trying to sell it to everyone. And they're go-getters, they're pretty active, they're pretty They're pretty into the whole sales, and they're extroverted, very energetic people. So they really do have this kind of uniquely energetic kind of energy to them. And when you go to Ecuador, it's kind of crazy. Like when you cross from Ipiales and you go over here, you make your way over to Ibarra or whatever. Like, actually the southern region of Colombia is slowly transitions into the more indigenous style. Because this is the Incan Empire, right? The Incan Empire made its way up to Pasto, and I think pretty much as much as Popayan. So yeah, starting in Popayan, you can start seeing that kind of an indigenous, authentic culture from the Incans. And so yeah, with that being said, that's going to be all of this area, Peru, and going over to, I think it's the same thing going over into Bolivia. So in general, I found them to be like very friendly, but in a way that was like, them recognizing that our cultures were so completely different, that they're and what's interesting about the like traditional and indigenous Incan style people is that a lot of them don't speak Spanish as a first language. So when you're talking to people that don't speak Spanish, just like, for example, me, I speak Spanish as a second language. So when we talk to each other, that's two people speaking their second language to each other. And in general, that's how it is. And, people were just like, they're easier to understand because they don't speak it like super like, like with a ton of slang and really fast or whatever. They speak kind of slowly, and they speak it kind of in a less like native way. And that's easier to understand. So it's a bit more fun to interact with them, to be honest, because they did speak slower and in a way that's easier to understand. And yeah, my interactions with them are great, but I didn't like, we kind of, I guess, kind of chuckled at the fact that, our cultures were so like completely different, Southeast of Zamora versus rural or small town Bolivia. South of Santa Cruz in Bolivia. Okay. So, yeah, 10 by. I think I mentioned before, I have not been to this part of Zamora. I have not been there, so I can't comment. I have not been at all, actually, in any of this part. Like a lot of expats, a lot of retirees, they go to Loja. They go retire there. They go down to actually a spot that's been very big was Vilcabamba. I was planning to go to Vilcabamba, which I heard was like a very laid back kind of hippie style town. And yeah, that's not far from there, right? So we're talking, who knows how Zamora from Loja. Yeah, so because of the mountains, tons of mountains, super close, but you have all these mountains, curves, hour and a half drive. So anyway, it's really close to Loja. I haven't been to Loja. The closest I've been is Cuenca. So if I were to compare it to Cuenca, Cuenca has, has that indigenous, Incan culture type of thing. And the people are like, mostly from that type of background. And yeah, very friendly, never had any issues. Overall great time. And in general, you hear people talk about all these problems with protests and problems with people like the locals, specifically like protests, like burning things down or whatever, but they're actually incredibly what would you say, polite is a word I'm trying to say, where when they do these type of protests and they do things to show their concern about something, they generally will just clean up everything after they're done, after they basically get what they are demanding, or and that's kind of an interesting part of that culture. Yeah, and then you said comparing it to a small town in Bolivia. Okay, so I didn't spend any time in small towns in Bolivia, besides like as I was driving through. And so Bolivia, the big cities I think are ideal for people because I feel like the small towns were really, really underdeveloped. The ones I drove through, the ones I drove past, um, it just gave me it gave me like a sense or a feeling that the small towns had even less resources and even less um, things to offer than Peru, which it is a bit more developed country, but it's still when you go into the smaller towns, it can lack what you need. So I mean, it really depends on if you want to find a place that's near a big town. Like for example, if you want to go to Santa Cruz is the biggest city, maybe find if you want to live in like one of these small towns. I drove through all of these, and you being near a big city in case you need to go to a decent hospital or a decent whatever health checkup or have a flight, that would be an option where you're not super far away and you can still get out of like the chaos of the city. So yeah, I didn't like spend any significant time on anywhere. I mean, I went to Samaipata, which is where a lot of, I believe, German expats go, but they're kind of more of an enclave. They kind of like keep to themselves and hide. So it's not really the expats that have like, maybe Americans or Canadians that go out and try and like meet up with you or try and have, meetings, like events to hang out and meet the other foreigners. Tinbai, the language aspect is really cool. Yeah. Yeah, I think the whole situation of like talking to someone that speaks Spanish as a second language but is from Latin America, like originally. It's very, very interesting, and it kind of hit me recently. I'm like, they don't even speak Spanish as a first language, because when I talk to them in like Peru and stuff, I'm like, man, their Spanish is weird. And then the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, that's because they don't even speak it as a first language. All right, guys. So I think I'm going to close things up pretty soon, but I wanted to mention that when it comes to doing your research, if the visa situation is not super big priority of yours, for example, my good buddy Sam, Scott Allen Miller in Nicaragua, he's constantly talking about how you should be doing a scouting trip on your first trip just to make sure that you're comfortable there and spend a decent amount of time, a month or two or whatever. You should be doing things that will ground you into the daily life type of activities. And you should be, looking at those things first before you like really jump into the visa that you might not even need or want when you're already in the country. Feeling out how the actual country feels to you, how the country, how the vibes are for you, if you like, get along with the people, if you're enjoying the food, if the weather was what you've, researched online before going, how easy the flights were to go there and back, if you're planning on going home and visiting family or whatever, friends back in the US or wherever you're from. There's a lot of things that go into that. And so Nicaragua was a really good example of why, looking into the city is a great starting point instead of looking into Nicaragua itself as like, okay, well, what are the main cities that people live in? Like, you can look that up on Google or whatever, and they might say, okay, well, yeah, San Juan del Sur, for example, and you can look into that and say, do I want to live on the coast? Do I want to live in like a kind of a small town, right? Do I want to live in a big city or near a big city? There's Managua, Masaya, So having an idea of how the different regions of the country are split up. For example, Panama. Here we have Panama City. Panama City's a pretty big urban type of city, very modern, and if you go from there, you go up to the north and go to Colón, the other side of the Panama Canal. That's actually going to be like really strong African influence, right? That one's part of the I believe the British colonies were all on this side here. That had the Africans on the northern part. The African influence is there. So, do you want to be on the coast where that is, the main type of culture? Do you want to be in like this peninsula right here where you're on the beach, but, you're pretty far from Panama City? Not as far, obviously, as like David or, in these areas. You can go to the mountains in Boquete. I interviewed there, and he talked about living there and how you can go about an hour down to David, which has most things that you would need from a big-ish city. So yeah, I mean, when you talk about the city, that's going to be a really huge factor for if you're going to even enjoy the country at all. So asking that visa question should be something that you do after you go and do your scouting trip, do your exploratory trip. I mean, obviously, if it's like priority for you, like I mentioned already, if that's like something that's going to knock countries off the list because of you want the really specific visa, I want the pensioner's visa if you're going to retire, or the digital nomad visa if you're working online, and like the minimum requirements for that. Yeah, of course, if that's most important to you, then start there and then go look for cities. But like I said, it's going to be basically night and day. Like, it's going to seem like almost a whole new country when you go to, when you change regions, for example, Medellin up to Cartagena or down to Popayan. We have another comment here, and I'm going to call it quits for tonight. I'm a bit tired. I ran 10 kilometers today on the beach, and I'm pretty tired from that run, and I have to work in the morning. So I wanted to just kind of have a little chat about this little idea that I saw from another channel, and I thought, it's a pretty good topic. Pretty good topic. Cochabamba is amazing. Glad you got to go. Chrissy says, yes, I heard people talk about Cochabamba before. Actually, there's a guy that has a YouTube channel that I met from England, and he doesn't make videos anymore, but he was a really cool guy, and he made a video about Cochabamba and talked about it, how he loved it. Oh, no, sorry. I'm not sure if he made a video from there. Maybe it was Santa Cruz. Anyways, I knew that there was a few retirees there, and there was a lot of expats, and I thought, okay, well, this is an awesome place to go to. And I will have actually probably 3 or 4 more videos in Cochabamba coming out specifically in Cochabamba. So Cochabamba might be one of my top cities in Latin America, next to, the coffee region in Colombia and Arequipa. I'm really big on the Arequipa city vibes of the great weather there and the great food in Peru and all that stuff. So yeah, really good. Yep, it's a hidden gem. Absolutely is, Chrissy. I totally agree. And yeah, well, I am happy that you all were able to join me. Guys, thank you for showing up, saying hi, and leaving your comments if you did. And yeah, like I said, salud to all you. Thanks for showing up to say hi. I'm going to be probably thinking of another topic. If you guys have any ideas for future topics for us to talk about in the next stream, I'm going to try and do another stream perhaps before I go to Argentina. Also, if you guys have any ideas for me of places to go show you in Argentina besides Buenos Aires, I will be mostly in the eastern area, the main city. They call it Cava, I believe. Ciudad Autónoma de Buenos Aires. And yeah, so I'm going to be doing tons of interviews there. I have a contact there. My buddy is helping me find people that have good stories of moving down. Argentina is a very interesting topic, and it's been changing quite drastically recently. So I'm very, very interested in giving people the updates on what it is to be in Argentina. In the past, I believe it was like super easy to get down there, to get the visas. The cost was insanely low, and the quality of life was very high. So things have changed. I'm very curious to see what people say about that. So that'll be coming up when I make it over to Buenos Aires in less than 2 weeks. And I'll be there for 1 month, maybe 2, and then heading up to Paraguay. So, guys, if you have any suggestions, ideas of places where you know that expats and retirees are, I'm always doing my research, but if you have any suggestions, let me know, and then I will try and find them as I go through. I'll give you guys a little overview of what my plans are for the rest of the year on the map, and then I'm gonna call it quits today. I'm a bit tired. So I'm in Montevideo right now, capital of Uruguay, most expensive country I've been to on this trip so far. About double the price of Costa Rica and about 3 times more expensive than Brazil. So from Montevideo, I'm going over to Colonia del Sacramento. There's a ferry that goes across this river, the Rio de la Plata, the Silver River of Silver. And then from Buenos Aires, the plan is to spend either a month or 2. If I spend only 1 month, I'll probably head up to Rosario. And then I'll head up to Paraguay to spend a couple months, 2-3 months in the winter season. So I'm thinking about possibly staying here in Encarnacion. It's going to be a very small town on the border, but it looks kind of nice without the river here, Paraná River. The Paraná River is pretty mighty, pretty huge, pretty cool to be around that river. And yeah, so I'll be spending the middle of the winter here, which has, just from what I've been seeing, pretty nearly perfect weather. And Asuncion, looks like they're having some floods right now. Probably some heavy rainfall. And from there, I'll be going back to Bolivia. So I will be back in Bolivia. Hopefully, I'll have all the Bolivia videos out before I go back. But yeah, I'll be going back up to Santa Cruz. Probably spend a month there again, and then probably head over to Sucre. Spend a month in Sucre. Not sure. Tarija is where my friend went to live, but I'm not sure if I'll be going there or not. And then I'll probably make my way down around November to Mendoza, and then cross over to Santiago for December. And then that'll be next year when I go drive all the way down to Ushuaia on the motorcycle. Ushuaia is down here. Where are we? Ushuaia. So that's the plan for me, and at least for my motorcycle side of the trip, that's been like what I've been kind of dreaming of since I started the entire thing. So that's going to be a pretty epic way to make it to the very end, very bottom, alone on the motorcycle. My friend might be joining me from Australia, but I mean, from Minnesota down to Ushuaia, pretty cool. And then after that, I'll be driving up north, and then go back through either probably Paraguay. Maybe go back to Paraguay. Not sure exactly how I'll plan this out, but I'll have to stay out of the country and out of Brazil until March of 2027, so then I can get 6 more months in Brazil. That's the plan, is to be able to spend 6 months driving up the northeast coast, and then probably taking the boat down, unless Venezuela is okay to go to at that point. But I'm not quite sure. Hard to say. In 1 year, will it change that much? Probably not. Bro, tell me that we got one more comment before I say goodnight. Where are we at here? Bro, tell me the truth about Cuenca and Guayaquil. What do you think? Keep it up like this. So I never spent a super long period of time in Guayaquil recently. I mean, I spent a month there in 2018. It was fine. It was normal, good city. A bit humid, a bit hot, but yeah, I mean, it has its kind of rough spots, but overall, it's a good city. It has some really nice areas, some really rich areas I wasn't expecting. And Cuenca is, I think, known to be the most expat friendly. They're very welcoming to foreigners, although other parts of Ecuador are not quite so safe recently, I've been told. But yeah, Cuenca is kind of known to be just more or less the safest and one of the most beautiful cities. Quito, on my first visit, I'm not sure why, I didn't think it was that nice. But then when I went back to Quito, I went to a couple parks there, went to the nicer zones like Carolina. I realized, well, Quito also is an awesome city. So, although if you saw my story with Jay, he left after being robbed in Ecuador. He was living in Quito. And yeah, so I mean, it really depends on what you want to get out of the experience and what you hope to achieve and enjoy from it. But yeah, both Quito is good. Cuenca's pretty much one of my top cities in Latin America as well. I'd say Cuenca is next to Cochabamba, and maybe Medellin's pretty amazing, but I don't think it's that great to live as of recently. The prices have gone super high, and it's become oversaturated. So yeah, other smaller mid-sized cities I think are better nowadays in Colombia. But anyways, guys, I'm gonna call it a night. Buenas noches. Gracias por aparecer. And we'll be chatting again. Let me know in the comments if you have any things you want us to cover and topics to chat about later. All right? Hasta la próxima. Ciao.